Welcome, everybody. I'm Beth Wingate, president of Lofeld Consulting Group and APMP fellow, former CEO of APMP International, and former president of the APMP National Capital Area chapter. We're recording today's webinar and will send a link to all participants after the webinar. We'll also post the webinar recording to our YouTube channel, so I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel to view this and our extensive library of capture, proposal, and generative AI content. I'd like to welcome our presenter today, Bruce Feldman, Lofeld Consulting Vice President for Artificial Intelligence. Bruce, over to you.
Beth, thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. This is the first webinar of a two-part series. In webinar number 1 today, we're going to talk about what we have learned doing business development, proposal, and capture work using GenAI over the last year. GenAI exploded into the public consciousness really in November of 2022, so it's been about a year and a half since we first realized what GenAI might be capable of. Now we have a year and a half of experience under our belt. Let me tell you about some of the lessons we've learned supporting our clients with GenAI support. In webinar number 2, we're going to take a look into the future, forecasting how GenAI might be used in the coming years and how the technology might continue to evolve. So in 2022, Lofeld Consulting Group did a survey of industry professionals who assist the government in evaluating proposals. One of the key takeaways from the results of that study was that industry spends a lot of its time on things that are not evaluated in the proposal, spending time and money on the wrong things. Lofeld has built a portfolio of best practices that are designed to help you win by promoting your ability to generate strengths for high-scoring, winning proposals. Over the last year, we've been learning how to use GenAI to write proposals faster, better, and cheaper. Estimates on cost savings and productivity enhancements range from 30% to 70%. A recent Microsoft study on productivity improvements available from using their Copilot for Enterprise product baselined in at 30%, which is an outstanding number for a capability that is still in its first year of industry adoption. We think savings well beyond that are attainable as well as we adopt and integrate generative AI into our corporate enterprises. What you will have to be able to do in order to achieve those savings is find ways to customize and use generative AI to implement your best practices for your market segments, your customer base, and those things you've learned through hard-won lessons learned and how to win in your industry segment. You're also going to learn how to move rapidly into integrating with your enterprise systems to make the data from those systems available to generative AI so you can derive the maximum value from your in-house corporate data holdings. We've been so impressed with generative AI, its ability to write beautifully. We think it's a foregone conclusion that we'll be using generative AI to help us write, as well as synthesize data and work to generate conclusions, insights, and new ideas. Generative AI will not replace people, but it will enhance your productivity and enable you to write better quality product as well. Now, we're familiar with generative AI for working on proposals because proposals are highly structured. We get requirements, we have structure, we have outline, we have inputs from capture. But also generative AI can help with capture itself, which is a much less well-structured process as we try to resolve and understand the unknowns and then address them with our clients. There's a lot you need to learn about how to make generative AI effective for you in both the capture and the proposal environment. It has amazing capability, but it also has significant limitations. And different GenAI platforms, different generative AI models will give you different performance. So you have to learn to select and use the right AI platform to address your corporate needs. And finally, a challenge that's really still underway is learning how to understand and project your return on your generative AI investment, the cost to acquire and use a platform versus the savings you generate. How long will it take you to break even? Artificial intelligence has been around for well over 50 years, and you've been using it yourself. If you text message and you allow your text messaging application on your phone to complete the sentence, you pick a word, that is an artificial intelligence application. Tools like Siri and Alexa are part of really modern day application for over 5 years now. What's new is that as of November 2022, we had that prominent explosion into the public awareness of generative AI, the ability to generate new content, never previously written or created before. Now, our focus here is mostly on generating text, but generative AI also generates visual arts, graphics, music, and other output applications. And we have a number of platforms that are probably familiar to you from popular media, platforms like ChatGPT, Microsoft Azure's, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, Anthropic Claude, and several other platforms as well. We also have the emergence of specialty platforms on secured platforms that are designed expressly for GovCon proposal work. So you can work with these platforms, you can have the capability of generative AI at your fingertips, specifically designed for proposal and GovCon related work, and also designed to protect your data from both leakage and from corruption. Given the presence of these capabilities today, we think the value proposition has emerged where if you're a knowledge worker in virtually any discipline, you need to learn how to use generative AI. Because if you don't, an AI-trained professional will replace you. So what can generative AI do for you? First of all, it writes beautifully. It's extremely powerful with ideas, language, meaning, and style, because generative AI is a language-driven capability. You can converse directly back and forth with an AI chatbot in most of the applications that are out there. And that will enable you to generate new text based on both the knowledge it has within its training data set, because generative AI can also be a subject matter expert as well. You also, on a secured platform, have the ability to add your corporate proprietary data without risk of compromise. So now you can create high quality, compelling proposal content. You can synthesize information from many different sources. You can do library search. You can add the results of internet search. It's becoming powerful, and it's increasing in its ability to generate high quality new content every day. In the Lohfeld Generative AI for Proposal Professionals class that I teach, we demonstrate the ability to generate all kinds of output products quickly, effectively, and with high quality. These are tasks typically done by a proposal professional, proposal writer perhaps, or a subject matter expert. That might take hours or days, but the time is condensed now into minutes. What's different is that we can generate a high quality draft, not a final product, but certainly a high quality draft that enables you to overcome that initial blank piece of paper problem and reach a high quality product in a fraction of the time it would have taken you in years past. In the class, we demonstrate the ability not only to do that, but to show some of the creative capabilities of generative AI as well. It writes beautifully. It looks simple enough. There's a large language model. There are several well-known foundation models out there, which I mentioned in the previous chart, things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Meta's Llama product, Google Gemini. These are all large language models that process language-based information. They are word prediction engines. You put a sequence of words in, and it predicts the next word that makes good sense coming out. And the word after that, the word after that, and the word after that. But it functions in such a way as to give you high quality output written product. There's a front end that converts natural language, as it's called, be it for most of us, probably English, into a mathematical representation. The large language model runs a series of calculations on that mathematical representation, and then the output is converted from numbers back into natural language. Notably, large language models don't learn. They are static environments. There certainly is enough misinformation out there that large language models might learn from us. That is not the case. However, the vendors that make large language models may have in their terms and conditions the right to record your interaction with their product so they can train future models. So one of the things we teach in our class is that you don't ever want to put your proprietary data out into a public generative AI platform that is not secured. The emergence of generative AI in the last year and a half to 5 years is made possible by relatively recent advances in machine learning, the evolution of what's called the transformer architecture, and then the ability to combine large numbers of graphic processing units to create the computing environment necessary to do all the work. The cost to create a high-performing large language model is significant, both in the hardware you have to acquire, the programming and maintenance, the electricity and cooling. One of the liabilities of generative AI is it is a black box. You put words in, you get words out, but you cannot reconstruct from the output the calculations and the work performed. You can't inspect the process. That leaves us all with uncertainty about how the result was obtained and whether or not we can trust it. But the generative AI platform has a lot of work that's done around it as well in order to make it as effective as possible. You can define in the information you input to the generative AI platform your personal characteristics, specifics of a request that you make. You can search and retrieve information from the internet. You can search and retrieve information from your corporate private library. If you have a secured generative AI platform, you can, in some cases, actually train the generative AI platform on your corporate data. There's a significant cost versus performance versus risk trade-off that you'll have to address in your return on investment calculation, so you can decide what sort and kind of platform to acquire and how you will acquire that service or capability. In some cases, you may choose a platform that searches your corporate data repository. In other cases, you may choose to actually train the model. There are significantly different cost, performance, and risk trade-offs to be assessed during the process of making that decision. We've seen a lot of misinformed writing in the media about the capabilities and limitations of generative AI, and in particular, its limitations. You may have heard about generative AI's potential to hallucinate. I've seen estimates in the literature of 2 to 4% of factual assertions made by generative AI are not correct. That is, it is made up. Because generative AI is not a database. It is not a knowledge repository. It is a language-driven word prediction engine. It embodies a lot of logic and reasoning in the relationship between natural language that is resident in the model itself. But it is not a calculation engine, nor is it software or a database. Also, generative AI has training dates. The knowledge that it has is fixed after a certain point. So, for example, ChatGPT 4 has a training date of April 2023. Since then, it hasn't learned anything new, nor will it until the next release emerges. So, generative AI is not learning off of you. It's not learning your corporate data when you use it. However, it depends upon whether or not the vendor that makes the generative AI and operates it on your behalf is recording that information or not. Generative AI can be forgetful in a long conversation. There's a feature called the context window. I think context windows are growing rapidly, and another year or two will no longer be a significant concern. But finally, you must have an environment and a deployment of generative AI that protects your proprietary data, both from corruption and from leakage. That is essential. IP infringement law is unsettled. There's a lawsuit now between the New York Times and OpenAI and also Microsoft, asserting that intellectual property infringement has occurred. The results of that lawsuit will determine to what extent we can use generative AI and what extent vendors can train generative AI on information. So I've talked a lot about differences between GenAI models. They vary widely depending upon, in large part, the data that they're trained on. And what you can see on the left side of this chart is some examples and characterizations of how these models may differ. What we have now as well is the emergence of some secured private platforms specifically designed for capture and proposal support related tasks. Those platforms all allow you to access and protect your corporate data without risk of compromise. They also have additional training and custom tools that are optimized for capture and proposal related work. And when your engagement with that vendor ends, they will not retain your corporate data. So some implications for BD capture and proposal related work. If you're a member of the GovCon community, things that you need to understand about generative AI. It does not necessarily know our professional jargon and word usage. If there's word ambiguity, generative AI may take one definition and you may be anticipating it to respond with a different meaning of that word. So those are ambiguities you need to resolve as you learn how to work with your platform. You need to teach your people that generative AI is not a database of facts or quotes, nor is it inherently a search engine. It has an enormous amount of information in it, potentially. It can behave like a subject matter expert, but it is not a database per se. Generative AI does not inherently know anything about your proprietary data. So one of the challenges we have to overcome is giving it access to your proprietary data so it can generate high quality, compelling proposal content. And finally, generative AI has limitations in the context window. It can be forgetful in a conversation. Again, I think a concern that will evaporate here in the next couple of years. One of the techniques we teach in our class is engineered prompts. These are prompts where you engage with a chatbot. You can structure the prompt. There are a number of different templates. And in fact, we have a prompt engineering guide that's available on the LowFUD website at your convenience. It gives you guidance and instruction on how to write in a way that allows you to frame your request and get the generative AI give you a responsive answer. So you're not struggling with repeated requests and tuning and tweaks of responses. You can get it to do it the way you want the first time. These are some techniques for prompting a generative AI chatbot effectively. Engineered prompts are complex sets of instructions. You can use chain of thought sequences of instructions or a hybrid approach where you combine both techniques. So we've analyzed from our experience over the last year to what extent we've actually been asked by our customers in the industry to help them use generative AI to do proposal-related work. What you see on the left is the industry BD lifecycle that we use to model how you might go about your process of identifying, capturing, and writing proposals to win new business. And we've identified, just from the proposal perspective, work that you would do prior to a final RFP, work you would do between RFP delivery and proposal submission, and then work you would do post-submit. We've identified about 40 use cases where customers have asked us to help them generate content using generative AI. Let me show you some examples of that. For pre-RFP proposal activities, we have the activity on the left, continuous solutioning, which is the continuation of solution development after you have seen perhaps an initial set of requirements from the government. You can also develop preliminary proposal artifacts. Some of the use cases we've addressed in this pre-final RFP phase are shown on the right. And again, work we've already done with current customers. Some more use cases for proposal development itself, so post-final RFP release. We've been using generative AI to analyze the RFP and come up with things like an initial draft work breakdown structure, WIBIS and data dictionary, generating questions, finalizing, analyzing, summarizing, writing, giving recommendations for graphics, and reviewing. Let me give you some insights from our first year and a half of using generative AI to do proposal-related work. We've identified about 40 use cases where we have supported our customers with using generative AI to generate proposal-related content in response to proposal-related tasks. What we've learned, among other things, is that it's essential your proposal professionals learn that generative AI is a tool that can help them. It's a productivity enhancement and quality improvement tool, but not an answer engine per se. Okay? You have to learn how to work with it. It is profoundly different from using a software or a database because it is language driven. When you select a GenAI platform, you need to ensure that it is adaptable to your corporate best practices. The blood, sweat, and tears that you have shed from wins and losses, all the work, all the evenings, all the weekends, on what it takes to generate high quality content, you want a generative AI that will adapt to your best practices. Is your generative AI platform customizable becomes the question. All the secured platforms for GovCon related work have canned prompts that the vendor has developed. In some cases, they have trained models. They have prompts that they've developed in-house that you can invoke. But what you need to be able to do is create your own library of prompts as well, so you can do things that follow your best practices. An additional issue that you need to take into account as well is that you will need to curate corporate data that you want to make available to the GenAI. You're going to want to tag it, be able to filter it, and make it readily accessible. And you don't want that data to include things that are no longer applicable, overtaken by events, or just simply no longer correct. If you would like low-thought assistance with generative AI adoption, we have a power user immersion program, a 6-week program where 2 of our very senior proposal experts, who are also highly proficient in generative AI, will work with you and your team on a live bid. We have our 3-day class on generative AI for proposal professionals. I'm the lead instructor for that. Okay. And we've trained almost all of our in-house consultants, over 100 people, who are experts in proposal development on how to use generative AI. So if your choice is to have a proposal expert come in and assist you on your existing GenAI platform, we can accommodate. And of course, Low-Code Consulting Group continues to offer the capture proposal services, which with you're already familiar, in winning bids.
Thanks so much, Bruce. We've received hundreds of questions from our webinar participants, so let's turn to those now. Do you have any insights into developing a plan and recommendations to convince company decision makers to seriously consider generative AI for proposal development? We talk about it, but it hasn't gone anywhere, and I don't have any formal decision-making authority.
In the webinar we're going to offer next week, we're going to talk to you about your AI adoption roadmap, not from the point of view of the IT program, but from the point of view of the business development, capture and proposal professional point of view. Winning over those people from whom you need buy-in in order to get approval to adopt generative AI is absolutely critical, and includes not only your CIO, but your CFO, your contracts executive, your BD team and personnel, and your HR team. So there's a lot of people you need to satisfy that generative AI is safe, is powerful, and will enhance your productivity. There's no single cookbook answer to answer your question of what needs to be done, but clearly, first and foremost is you must provide assurance that the generative AI platform you select is going to be resistant to cyber attack, will protect your data's integrity, and leave it resistant to corruption and not leak out inadvertently into the public domain.
Thank you. How much data preparation will we need to do to make our information accessible and valuable in a generative AI system?
That's going to depend on the type of AI platform that you select. If you select a platform where the generative AI engine has a semantic search capability that takes your prompt, searches your corporate holdings, you don't need much curating of the data, except only to provide and make accessible the data that you wish it to be able to search. And then you do creates what's called a vectorized database, which can be done automatically as part of the platform capability. You'll want to tag your data so you can filter it. So every time you invoke a search, you're not searching everything in your corporate database. You want to be able to down select to the part of the database that you want to search from, so you get it as quickly as possible. At the other end of the spectrum, if you choose to train the model literally on your data and actually modify the content of the model, the actual numerical coefficients inside of it, you have to curate your data much more carefully, and there'll be a lot more preparatory work, and you'll need AI engineers to support you in that process. So really, it's going to depend on the type of model that you select, the platform you select, and it's obviously a key point of discussion you should have with prospective vendors.
Thank you. Bruce, what's your opinion on open source models? For example, Gemini, Llama 2, Falcon, or Mistral. Are they more, as much, or less reliable for proposal writing than offerings like ChatGPT?
I can give you a partial answer. In January of this year, we completed a study benchmarking a comparison of public AI platforms with two of the secured private platforms that are designed expressly for GovCon proposal-related work. We compared 5 public platforms with 2 private platforms. The results we found were the private platforms performed as well or better on 8 separate proposal-related tasks. We'll discuss those tasks in depth in the webinar next week. What we found is that the secured platforms do a better job, and additionally, they don't create the risk that your data is going to be recorded and then inadvertently or deliberately used to train future models because you're working on a public platform. It's one of the things we teach all of our students, and we emphasize over and over again. Don't use a public platform for your proprietary data.
Are there any industry benchmarks for the time savings companies have realized after implementing GenAI in their proposal process? And what percentage of your AI budget would you spend on an AI tool?
Those are 2 great questions. I think there's a limited amount of hard data out there right now on how much productivity enhancement can be obtained through using generative AI to do proposal work. The number I saw earlier this week in my newsfeed suggested 30% productivity. I think that's a low-end number, because workforces still are adapting to the use of the tool and still optimizing processes, both their best practices and how to apply the generative AI to achieve maximum productivity enhancements. So that's more to come on that. I've seen vendor estimates of productivity enhancements of up to 70%, but again, I can't really vet the source of that information. I think the answer is going to fall somewhere in between.
And what percentage of your AI budget would you spend on an AI tool?
I think that's a return on investment question that's going to, again, be heavily dependent on what kind of savings you have that are attainable. You're going to have to assume that there's a acquisition cost for the platform. There may be a recurring cost for seat licenses and monthly sustainment or O&M assistance. So really, the amount of time it takes for you to kind of break even and see positive return on your investment in terms of overall savings to the company will take time. I will say that I'm not aware of any industry where generative AI has started causing layoffs or massive reductions in personnel costs. I think it's going to be more a matter of the company taking those savings and choosing where to reinvest them, be it in additional capability, be it in preparing or generating more proposal content, or be it applying it to other company-related issues.
Thank you. Do you have any guidance for proposal teams that include subject matter experts who may use AI but are unfamiliar with proposal processes? For example, Lofeld, Shipley, review cycles, solutioning.
We think it's essential that the people working on proposals in key roles have really effective training in understanding how to generate high-quality proposal content in order for you to win. Getting to compelling is becoming more and more a critical task, especially since generative AI enables you to generate proposals that are compliant and I think somewhat responsive already. But getting the differentiated high-value offering in there requires training and insight to how to do the work. So I think it's essential your subject matter experts and your contributors have some familiarization and training in how to write high-quality proposal content. Using generative AI as a tool is just to assist them. It can't replace them.
Great, thank you. If many IT contractors use GenAI to respond to federal proposals, how will their proposals stay differentiated enough not to look like the other proposals? Several messages have come back from the federal contracting shops cautioning not to use these types of tools, referring to ChatGPT.
So one of the things we believe is a significant concern for the government is that they will be inundated with compliant, responsive, but not compelling proposals because the cost of creating those proposals will decline because generative AI will make us more productive. It is a legitimate concern. I think we'll see a couple responses from the government here emerging over time. One is I think we'll see them changing how evaluation is done. You may see more multiple gate solicitations where you have to satisfy some highly objective criteria in a gate 1, and then you submit your actual full-fledged proposal in a gate 2. You may also see increased reliance on oral presentations so the government can see and hear from your proposed project team directly. So those are key considerations in how the government is thinking about it. I have heard of one case where the government was so inundated with responses to a bid that was largely a compliance responsiveness type of a bid that they had to actually withdraw the solicitation and reissue it as a small business set aside. So that concern is real. The key for you in a best value type framework is going to be continuing to get your company's best capabilities and differentiated offerings into your proposal in a way that is compelling and you outscore your competitors. GenAI can help you certainly write effectively, but it's not going to replace, at least today with the current generation of tools, the human being's ability to make the case that you offer the government unique, unmatched capability.
It's all about scoring. Can you presume any subject matter expertise from LLMs, large language models? If yes, what methods of prompting help draw this out?
Well, I think the answer is yes. Some of these models are highly knowledgeable of areas. Even the ones that are trained explicitly for GovCon-related work can act as experts in a number of fields. I know IT and artificial intelligence are two of the ones where they have significant amounts of data in the corpus of information that they're trained on. And again, it varies widely from model to model. So you don't want to make any assumptions about what one model might do based on your experience with a different model. Beth, what was the second part of your question?
If yes, what methods of prompting help draw this out?
Well, the easiest way to do it is to give the generative AI a requirement and then have it generate a response and show it to a SME and have the subject matter expert assess whether or not the output meets their standards for high quality, insightful content. Now, one thing you can do as a test is have the generative AI not only generate a response, but have it generate questions that a SME should be asked to validate the quality of the response. That will give you some insight into whether or not the generative AI really understands or is showing you understanding and insight into the content.
Thank you. How can we use AI to help with compliance matrices, writing past performances, and refining resumes?
Well, let's be careful about compliance matrices because those words mean different things to different people. Certainly, generative AI can help you shred an RFP. I think that, in fact, that's going to be commoditized. That will be just a standard feature of generative AI for GovCon related work platforms pretty soon. Generating a traceability matrix and an outline that fuses proposal instructions, evaluation criteria, PWS, and other RFP components into a single outline requires a lot of logic and reasoning capability that, to my experience, is not present yet in generative AI models, even the ones that are enhanced for GovCon related work. You can perhaps have generative AI generate an initial outline for you, but it will certainly need to be closely and carefully examined and checked by your proposal manager and the other people responsible for generating that outline. With regard to resumes and past performance, other structured outputs, the capability is there. You may have to write or have access to engineered prompts that help you structure the response in a way that is compatible with the requirements of the solicitation. So if the government gives you a resume template, you'll have to convert maybe existing street resumes or corporate resumes into a different format and then supplement them with different information. That can be done, but you have no assurance that a given platform is going to be able to generate a resume in that template for a future solicitation. So you're going to need to be able to generate or create engineered prompts that will do that for you.
Next question. We'd like to automate our proposals, specifically AI searching of our database of previous proposals, including capabilities, past performance, key personnel, etc., and use this data to draft a proposal that meets Section L and Section M in the RFP.
So searching your corporate knowledge base is an essential component of generating compelling, winning proposal content. I gave before some insight into two different ways of approaching that problem. One is doing a search of the corporate knowledge base using semantic search, which is a search for meaning, where the search retrieves snippets of information from the corporate knowledge base that you can track back to, but also can be then input to the GenAI in order to generate a comprehensive response. At the end of the spectrum, you can literally train your model at some expense and some time cost on your corporate knowledge database as well, in which case you will receive outstanding performance, but I think with a measurable cost impact. And that's part of the decision space you'll need to make a decision on as you select your AI platform. The capability to do what you ask is there. It's really more of a question of how your platform is going to implement it and how much you're willing to spend on it.
Thank you. Can you share any insights about the government's use of GenAI in developing RFPs and evaluating proposal responses?
I have no personal insight into what the government is doing with generative AI today. I have read that the government is using generative AI to draft solicitation documents, which I think makes perfect sense to me as an application of generative AI for the government on the acquisition side of the house. Again, I would stipulate to the government, if asked, that you really need to have a human being review the work, because generative AI will hallucinate, it will make things up, and it has other limitations. With regard to proposal evaluation, I think I am less certain about generative AI, the current generation of tools being used for that. Even evaluating proposal compliance, just meeting the checklist, you have to be wary of generative AI being incorrect or not understanding the instructions or not interpreting correctly. I don't think we are ready yet to use generative AI certainly to judge the quality of a solution and the best value determination. It might be able to offer you insight, questions, and observations, but again, those will be as a supplement to human evaluation.
What resistance have you seen from government procurement officials regarding the use of AI for proposal development?
It's clear, again, as said before, that the government does not want to be inundated with proposals that are compliant and responsive, but not compelling. I think that's a significant concern, that they'll be flooded with bids that, frankly, are not really worth their time to evaluate. So it's incumbent on us, if we're going to use generative AI to be more productive, to make sure that the bids we generate really are compelling. They contain a value proposition that shows the differentiated value that our company can uniquely provide. I think that's a legitimate way for the government to consider how to filter down to those bids in the acquisition process.
So it's not an easy button.
No, at least the current generation of tools, in my opinion, are not ready yet to help you with the best, or to give you a high quality recommendation on the best value determination.
Thank you. Would you anticipate that contracting officers will accelerate the adoption of scorecard proposals in order to neutralize the impact of AI-generated text?
I think it's almost the opposite. I think scorecard generate proposals enable you to pull snippets of information and then populate a block, right? That we do this or we don't do this. To the extent that generative AI can very quickly help you find those sources of information and establish whether or not you meet that objective criterion, I think the government is likely to get more responses, not fewer. Of course, that's dependent on your company having that capability in the first place. But from a search point of view, generative AI can really speed up your process.
Thank you. What strategies do you employ to ensure proprietary information is protected?
That's a key part of the generative AI architecture. There are a number of different strategies out there. I'll give you some examples. You can have a GenAI platform that is hosted in your company's virtual private cloud. You can have a generative AI that's hosted on your company's on-premise IT infrastructure. You can have a generative AI that is hosted in a virtual private cloud that belongs to the vendor. Those kinds of tenant-based solutions, which have already been largely accepted in industry as secure for protecting your proprietary data, platforming the generative AI within them should be able to be readily acceptable. And again, there are nuances here that I'm not speaking to, like, impact level and, capabilities like that. So there's more to it than that. I'm really oversimplifying the answer here. But having said that, I think the key thing is don't use public platforms where the vendors record your interaction, lest you inadvertently disclose proprietary data that will then be used to train future AI models that might appear someday now when the next model becomes available and your competitor might be using it.
How do you generate content that is relevant and responsive to the context, not in a regurgitation of information from various internet sources?
Well, one of the great things about generative AI is it writes beautifully and it generates new content. If you experiment with it, if you were to give it 5 different sources quoted in a prompt and say, now combine these into a narrative, it will generate words in a sequence that have never been generated before. It is truly generative. It is creative. So that is not so much a concern. It's not going to appear to be plagiarism. Now, that is, I will tell you right now, the subject, the heart of a lawsuit filed by the New York Times against OpenAI and Microsoft over exactly that contention. My experience with generative AI is it's not going to be a quotation engine. It's not a database of knowledge. It's going to be creative in how it presents the content. So you don't have to worry so much about it regurgitating and plagiarizing content that can be then detected by a plagiarism detection engine.
I'd like to know about security, particularly related to CUI and protecting proprietary information when working with AI tools.
First of all, I suggest you speak with the vendors. I know there are platforms out there that operate at IL5 and can be hosted in a fashion that is authorized for protection of CUI. But you really need to speak to the vendor about their particular implementation. And I would encourage you to ask whether or not they have already done it before and had a customer accept their deployment.
We have time for one more question. Are there any specific skills or training that proposal writers or government contractors should acquire to effectively leverage generative AI tools in their work?
So we teach a lot of prompt engineering in the class at Lofeld, the 3-day Generative AI for Proposal Professionals class. I think prompt engineering is going to remain to be a key skill as long as we're working with chatbots. A chatbot is a generative AI platform with which you have a conversation. You give it a prompt and input, it gives you a response. You may want to have a follow-up question, it can give you a follow-up response. And so it goes in a true conversational mode. There are ways to structure prompts to get the results that you desire. Now, I have seen what I consider poorly informed information in the press. We're all going to become prompt engineers. It's the new labor category of the future. I'm not quite sure I'm there yet. There is certainly highly sophisticated prompt development behind the scenes by the software engineers working with the vendor or for the vendor. But having said that, I think everybody is going to need some level of proficiency with writing basic prompts in such a way that they can engage with a chatbot to get the work they want, accommodating the best practices for the company that they're working for.
Thanks so much for sharing your experience and insights from a year of using generative AI for proposal work with us, Bruce. Again, we'll send a link to the recording of today's webinar to everyone. We'll also post the recording to our YouTube channel. So I really encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel to view this presentation and our ever-increasing collection of proposal capture and generative AI content. Please be sure to join us for part 2 of this webinar series. You can find the registration link on our website and in the follow-up email to this webinar. Visit lowfellconsulting.com for more information about how we can support your team with capture and proposal support, and to talk with us about adopting generative AI to streamline your proposal development. Thanks.